Welcome to our presentation on the American Rescue Plan and how we can use it to invest in early education. I'm Laneta Fitisemanu, Policy Fellow with Voices for Utah Children, and I'm presenting with Anna, who is a Senior Policy Analyst. If you want to go to the next slide really quick, we'll just put our lovely faces up there with our contact information. And just a little bit about Voices for Utah Children. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan, statewide advocacy group, and we analyze and advocate for policies that are good for our Utah children. And one of our big focus areas is on early education and care. And that's just a little bit about us. So we'll just dive into this presentation. Just a quick overview. I'm going to cover how local education agencies can use the ARP dollars and what that money looks like that's coming in. And then we'll talk a little bit about why we should use these funds towards expanding full day kindergarten and pre-K. And then Anna will kind of go over how you can help advocate to use funding for those programs. Awesome. So just a little basics on the funding that's coming in. The actual fund is called Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief Fund, and we'll refer to it as ESSER throughout the presentation, but these are still under the American Relief Plan. Utah is set to receive $683 million, and that's just going towards education. The state is getting up to like $3 billion. And so there's a lot of money coming in from this relief fund. But for today's purposes, we're just going to focus on the education funding that it's receiving. And so 683 million is going towards education. By law, 90% have to be given directly to local education agencies. And so that money that will be trickled down to the LEAs is going to be an amount of 615 million. Do the next. Great. So in terms of funding distribution, funding is going to be distributed based on your overall proportion of Utah Title I funding that each district normally receives. And the spending timeline, it needs to be spent by September 2023. That gives us 2 full school years and 3 summers, so we can start using the funding this summer. Great. Actual amounts have not been publicized yet, but USBE has committed to making the individual LEA amounts available by June 15th on their website. And we've included the link on there for you to go back in and check around that time to see what your LEA will be receiving. In the next couple of slides, I've included a link to the ESSER fact sheet from the US Department of Education. We pulled some quotes from this fact sheet that we think will apply to expanding full day kindergarten and pre-K. And so a lot of the guidelines are going to come from that fact sheet in the next couple of slides.
Laneta, can I add one thing really quickly? That, to be fair, I forgot to send you for the slides, but I checked in with our colleagues over at the State Board of Education after the special session concluded on Wednesday, and looking at the bill that approved all of this funding, there doesn't appear to be any specific state restrictions imposed by the legislature that are related to the spending of this money. So in the CARES Act funding, there were a few rules around what sort of facilities improvements could be made with that money. And there aren't any new restrictions from the legislature on how this ESSER money might be used.
Great. Thanks, Anna. So one of the quotes that we're pulling from the fact sheet that we think applies to full day kindergarten expansion is The funding can be used to address learning loss through the implementation of evidence-based interventions. And we know that full day kindergarten and preschool programs, we have lots of data that shows that it's good for kids and their learning. And so this would definitely be something to support full day expansion. The next one is that it can be used to address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on underrepresented student groups. And I put on the slide what those groups entail according to the guidelines, which is, major racial and ethnic groups, children from low income, children with disabilities, English learners, gender, migrant students, and students experiencing homelessness, including child and youth in foster care. And so pre-pandemic, we understand that there were a lot of learning gaps with these groups already. And now with COVID-19, it's just exacerbated these learning gaps with these groups. But we know that interventions like full day kindergarten and pre-K programs, especially for these groups, like children with disabilities and English learners, can really help close those gaps for those students, more so than all the other students that it's also helping, but it really helps these groups specifically. And then lastly, it says other activities that are necessary to maintain operation and continuity, I can't even say it, continuity of services, including continuing to employ existing or hiring new LEA and school staff. So yes, this one is really important because it's saying that we can hire new staff, which includes kindergarten teachers, to help expand these programs. Another thing that the guidelines show is that the ESSER fundings can be used for the same things as the Every Student Success Act, the ESSA Title I funds. And so we know that Title I funds are being used to expand full day kindergarten. We know that some schools are using a combination of the IDEA funds and Title I funds to fund preschool programs in their communities. And the base language of the ESSA states that you can use it for ages birth to age of school entry, which includes this age group for kindergarten and pre-K. And so all of those things that we use Title I funds, we can definitely use with this ESSER. And I think that's my part. Anna's going to kind of talk more about how we can specifically use the ESSER funds with expanding kindergarten.
So many acronyms, and it's almost like we're trying to make it hard with the ESSER and the ESSA funding. But the good thing is that they're very similar, like you said, so we know that they can be used for the same things. So yeah, now is the time. This great article was just published in the Wall Street Journal the other day about specifically like kids coming into kindergarten and kids coming into first grade who haven't had a school experience yet and who will be coming into school in the fall. So we know that we can use the ESSER money to expand full day kindergarten. We're going to talk a little bit about how specifically. Like Laneta said, it is fine to use this money to hire new staff. So you can hire new kindergarten teachers. I know it's not ideal from a labor perspective, but if you need to offer a 2-year contract to assuage your business administrator's concerns, go for it. Really, the priority is getting these interventions to the children who need it. You can also hire new paraprofessionals so you can spread out your teachers among your full day classrooms a little bit easier, and to support teachers who maybe will be teaching full day kindergarten for the first time, giving them some extra support in that. You can also use this money to build or purchase or repair additional facilities for space you may need to expand your full day kindergarten programs. Adding kindergarten classrooms requires space. So this can include utilizing mobile classrooms for older kids and using classrooms inside for younger children. You could partner with other government entities in your area to utilize their space for preschool and kindergarten programs near to your main school building. the big hook with the ESSER funding is, due to our COVID-19 realities, we know more physical space creates a safer and healthier learning environment for children, for staff, and for teachers in schools. So building additional facility space for kindergarten and preschool, along with other building modifications, can help you both address the learning loss through the programs and help spread people out in your school a little bit better for health reasons. You can also pay for professional development for kindergarten teachers who are switching from half day to full day to help them make that switch. And you can offer bonus pay or pay increases as they complete important certifications and trainings related to early education. Okay, so we know we can use the funds for full day kindergarten and preschool, and we have some ideas of how to use that money. Now, the big question is, how do we convince those reluctant leaders and finance folks and school board members who are saying things like this? And we hear this a lot everywhere, but this is just one-time money. We don't want to get a program started if we're just going to have to get rid of it in 2 years. It's hard on the kids. It's hard on the community. And we get that. That is a perfectly understandable first response, especially in the education world where funding and programs come and go all the time, sometimes to the detriment of long-term improvements for students. But remember, this does happen all the time. Funding for particular programs is never certain. Superintendents and principals leave and they upend efforts that they initiated before they can take hold. We have been here many times before. And we at Voices would stress, we can't let the uncertainty of the future funding landscape in 2024 scare us away from investing in early education right now for kids' prolonged academic success. So here's some ways to think about using your ESSER funding through 2023 that are both optimistic, but also true. They are realistic. And we've been talking to educators throughout Utah about how they're thinking about this money, as well as national advocates who are talking to educators all over the country about this. So the first one is, this is great. We have 2 years to prove that this program is worth the investment. We basically have startup money for full day kindergarten for 2 years. We'll use the PEEP and the KEEP and our other metrics to track how truly effective these interventions are for our kids. And in 2024, we'll be more than ready to make our case to the district, the school board, the legislature, anyone who will listen, that this program should receive other funding when the federal dollars run out. Making the case for full day kindergarten with these education dollars from the feds. Second way to look at it, what an opportunity. We have 2 years to just jump into full day preschool expansion while assessing the cost effectiveness of all our programs to reorient ourselves toward a commitment to early intervention. You probably already know, as per ESSA requirements, Title I requirements, your district should be conducting cost benefit analyses regularly anyway. Zero in on the programs and spending that don't serve your community. Move those out to make way for early education. You may find, as has occurred in other Utah districts, that investing in full day kindergarten will allow you to eliminate costs and interventions that you've needed later when kids enter first grade really far behind. So you may have more funding available after 2 years than you think in 2024, thanks to your early action to get kids on track. And we have seen this in other Utah districts that have implemented full day kindergarten in the past. Their expansion allowed paraprofessionals and reading specialists to be moved away from first and second grade classrooms and deployed in different areas where they were needed more. And finally, consider the fact that there may be future funding from the feds to help fill this gap, even when this funding is spent. We know it's not a done deal, but current elected officials at the federal level have already proposed the biggest increase to Title I funding ever. It is a distinct possibility that in 2 years, your school would have a larger share of Title I funding available, which then could be prioritized to sustain full-day kindergarten and preschool programs. So we know that every district is different. So every approach to using this money for early education will also look a little different. And your advocacy to help make sure this happens will also look different. We know different LEAs have different proportions of Title I students in the state. So you may have, we're not quite sure exactly how much funding you'll have to work with. And every LEA has different pots of money that they can combine with this money in order to expand their programs. We also know different LEAs face different barriers to expansion, like available physical space, as I mentioned before, different levels of ease in terms of recruiting new kindergarten teachers. And of course, the big one that we see a lot at the policy level is the fact that the creativity, the courage, and the vision of LEA leaders, and that includes business and finance managers, as well as school boards, that is really different across the state. But what we have seen that is the same across many LEAs in Utah is the understanding that early education is by far the most impactful, effective place to invest. The data are very strong from many existing programs. As Laneta said before, full day kindergarten works, and it works especially well for kids from marginalized communities who don't have the same advantages as their peers. And when educational interventions happen early, they're less expensive and more impactful. And we are definitely, as that Wall Street Journal article pointed out, going to need early interventions more than ever before in the next several years. After the past 15 months, we can expect to see multiple cohorts of young children coming into our public schools over the next few years who have really suffered during the last 15, 16 months. We should be orienting our school budgets toward these younger students who will be entering school with a fair amount of learning and social disruption already under their belts. So think of this as front loading this federal funding to ensure smoother sailing for your students, for your staff, and for your community in the years to come. We always say it's never been more important, but it really never has been more important than getting these kids on track. Whoops, did I go backwards? There we go. All right, so that's it. That's all we have for today. We didn't get too deep into the weeds, and we hope this information has been helpful for you. We, meaning Voices, our partners at United Way, our colleagues at the Utah State Board of Education, we want to do what we can to support LEAs in using this incredible opportunity to build plans for expanding full-day kindergarten to meet the needs and the desires of their communities. So if you want to get engaged with other educators and administrators statewide who are also committed to providing full-day kindergarten, join us. We've been meeting fairly regularly since December, January, and we'd love to have you join. Our next meeting is Wednesday, June 16th at 10 a.m. Just reach out to me or to Laneta. Oh, I guess to me. Thanks, Laneta, since my email's up there. Just reach out to me and we'll get you the details and you can participate. It's awesome to be able to trade ideas with districts clear across the state from you who may actually have really similar challenges to expanding. And of course, if you have any questions about what you've heard today, feel free to contact us or your contacts for early education at the State Board of Education.